All right, so in this video here, we're going to be talking about Chapter 1's quiz review. And so we're going to go over half of it in this video and then the other half in another video. So let's get started here. We're going to be talking about simplifying equations. And in the first problem here, you can see that you have some like terms, like these both are n's and these both are numbers. So what we do is we combine the like terms. So we got to identify them first. So like I said before, these both are n's. So that's a -7 added with a +10. That means you have 3n left when you combined. And when you look at the numbers, that's a -7 and that's a -8. They're both numbers, so when you combine them, that is going to be 15. 7 and 8 add up to be 15. Since they're both negative signs, it's going to be a -15. And when we look at these two terms here, they are not like terms anymore, so you are done simplifying. So that is our final answer. Let's take a look at number 2 here. So number 2 looks like you have a parentheses. And so order of operation says that if you have things in the parentheses, you can try to simplify, but you can't here. These are not like terms. But then next, you don't have an exponent, but you do have multiplication here. So you have to do multiplication. So I'm going to distribute the negative, positive 9. So this is -6 plus 9 times 8 is 72, and then 9 times a -2 is going to give us -18b. And then we look again to see what variables we can combine. So these both are numbers, so we can combine these two. So -6 plus 72, they're opposite signs, so we need to subtract the 6 from the 72 to give us 66. And so we have 66 minus 18b. And that's our final answer because we can't combine any further. And then for the third one here, we got a lot of parentheses. So again, we have to distribute the number that's in front first. So I'll go ahead and do that. So we have a -2x. Two negatives multiply make a +4. And then if I multiply the 5 or distribute the 5, I get +5x, and then 5 times 3 is 15. So then I notice that I can combine these x's together. So -2x plus 5x gives me 3x. And then the 4 added with the 15 is going to give me 19. And there we go. So 3x plus 19 is going to be the simplified version. And that is it. Let me double check there. Yeah. 4 plus 15, 19. All right, next thing we have is, again, similar to number 3, we're going to have to distribute the 3 and the -4. Make sure you distribute that negative with that 4. So we have 3x minus 45 minus 8x plus, let's see, 4 times 2 is another 8, so +8, since there are two negatives here, so we get a positive. And so looking at this here, we can combine the 3 and the -8 to get -5x. And then the +8 combined with the -4, so if you take -45 and add it with 8, you get -37. And so then I can't combine any more terms, so this is my final answer. All right, so that was for simplifying expressions. Let's take a look at absolute value equation. So when you're solving absolute values equation, the first thing you need to do is make sure that absolute value is by itself. So notice how this absolute value is not by itself. Outside of the absolute value, there's a +4. So we need to remove that first before we do our split. So in this case, we're going to subtract over 4 to remove it. Cross that out, and now you have a 6x minus 3, and then 9 minus 4 is 5. And then this is where you have the absolute value by itself, so now you can go ahead and split this into two equations. Remember, one is going to be +5, and then the other is going to be a -5, because we have to account what if that number inside the absolute value was a negative. So we're going to solve it. So, of course, we need to add over 3 first, and then we have 6x equals 8. 5 plus 3 is equal to 8. divide the 6 over, now this is going to be a fraction, but that's okay. So x is equal to 8 over 6, or if you reduce that, think about it, 8 and 6 are both even numbers, so if you divide 8 by 2, you get 4. If you divide 2 into 6, you get 3. So our first answer here is 4 over 3. Our second one, we're going to have to do the adding 3 over to both sides again. And so we have 6x equals negative 5 plus 3 is going to be a negative 2. And so if I divide by 6, x is equal to negative 1/3 if I reduce, because in this case I can divide this by 2 and I can also divide this by 2, and so that would give me 1 over 3 as my solution. Alright, so my two solutions here for this answer is going to be 4 over 3 and negative 1/3. Let's take a look at number 6. So number 6 has a 2 on the outside. So remember, we got to get the absolute value by itself. So I'm going to divide 2 to both sides so I can cancel out that 2. Now, be very careful. A lot of people, when they see this 2 outside the absolute value, they think of this as a parentheses. Absolute values do not work as parentheses. Please do not distribute inside the absolute value sign. You got to divide that off and then try to get the absolute value by itself. So here we go. So 4 minus x equals 6 after we've divided. And now we get to split it up because the absolute value is by itself with a positive 6. And we're going to write the other one with a negative 6. And then we just start solving. So let's subtract over the 4 first. Try to get that x by itself. And so now we have negative x equals 6 minus 4 is 2. If I divide by... think of this as like a negative 1. If you want to get rid of it, you can divide by negative 1, and that will cancel. And so x equals 2 divided by negative 1, which is negative 2. So that is our first answer. The next one here, again, we're going to have to subtract over that 4. So same thing as before. And so that negative, let me write it over here. That negative x is now on the left-hand side. Negative 6 minus 4 is going to be minus 10. If I divide a negative 1, because this is technically a negative 1, so if I divide off that negative 1, x equals positive 10. So x can equal negative 2 or positive 10 as my solution. Okay, now let's get into the tougher ones here. So this one here, we have a 5 and a negative 8 on the outside. The question is, which one do we remove first? And you always want to remove the thing that's the furthest away from what you're solving. So you're trying to get this absolute value by itself. The 5 is the furthest thing away, so I'm going to remove that first. It'll be a lot easier to remove the 5 because all I have to do is subtract it over. And so now I have a negative 8 absolute value of n equals negative 80 if I combine these two. And then from there, I'm going to need to divide the negative 8 to both sides to get rid of that. And then I have an absolute value of negative 2n. And negative 80 divided by negative 8 is going to be positive 10. And so I'm going to split these up. You have a negative n equals positive 10, and you have a negative n equals negative 10. And so if you were to divide by negative 2, I'm just going to do this simultaneously for both equations. This n would be negative 5, whereas the other n would be a positive 5, because two negatives make a positive, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So these are the two solutions. Last but not least, we have number 8. So for number 8, notice how this absolute value is already by itself. And so lucky for you, you can go ahead and split it up because you have a positive 6 on this side. So let's go ahead and split this up into negative 2n plus 6 equals positive 6, and negative 2n plus 6 equals negative 6. So we're ready to solve here. So we're going to go ahead and subtract the 6 to both sides because we're trying to get the n by itself. We're trying to solve for that n. So we get a 0 because 6 minus 6 is 0. And now I just have that negative 2 dropping down. And so I'm going to divide by 2, negative 2. And so n equals, well, if 0 is on top, anytime you have 0 on the top and you're dividing, that turns into 0. 0 on the denominator is going to be undefined, but 0 on the top would end up being 0 if you divide. And then the other one here, we have, again, we have to subtract that 6 over. So we have a negative 2n equals, well, if these are two negatives, you have to add. So 6 plus 6, 12, but they're both negative, so negative 12. All right, we're going to divide that negative 2 over, and that makes it into a positive. And so two negatives make a positive. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So n can equal 0 or 6. All right, so if you're good on absolute values, let's head into inequalities. So inequalities are looking at those crocodile signs or those mouth signs that either it always faces towards the bigger number. So in this case here, we're going to be given an inequality, and you have to sketch the graph. So do your circles, open and close, and then shade in where x exists, and also write the interval notation. So let's review just a tiny bit. Remember, if you have inequalities like this without a line, you use an open circle, and then you also use a parentheses to show it an interval term. Whereas if you have inequalities with the line underneath, you use a closed circle on the graph and use a bracket to show it as an interval. So now that we've kind of reviewed a little bit, let's get into it. So when you have an inequality, you want to start by putting down your numbers and putting it down from lowest number to greatest number. So negative 3 is going to come on the left-hand side since it's our smallest number here. And I need an open circle on the 3 because notice that inequality does not have a line, whereas the 5, I need a closed circle because it does have a line. Now notice that x is between these two numbers, so you're going to be shading between them. And so when I see this graph here, I can see, oh, this shaded region is showing me my interval. And it's from negative 3 to 5. So negative 3 to 5, parentheses and bracket, because that is an open circle and that's a close on the 5. All right, this next one here is a one-sided one-sided inequality, and you'll see here, if I were to plot my 4, I need an open circle because there's no line underneath, but it says that x is less than 4. If x is less than 4, it's thinking about numbers that are less than 4, like 3 is less than 4. And 3 would be like located right here. So it's heading in this direction. It's heading towards the negative infinity direction. So you want to shade all the numbers between 4 and onwards to the left, so negative infinity to 4. And so that is also our interval. We're going to put a negative infinity and a 4 down. We need a parentheses on the 4 since it's an open circle. And remember, we can never touch infinity, so we always use a parentheses. All right, 2 more to go. So looking at this one here, notice how we, again, have those inequality symbols, but this time they are in set builder notation. But treat these just like you would have treated the problems on above them. Look at the intervals and determine what your graph is going to look like. So this is an x between 1 and 4. So I'm going to put down 1 and 4. I need an open circle on 4, closed circle on 1. And I'm going to shade between them because x is between 1 and 4. And so then my interval notation is going to be 1 to 4, parentheses and bracket because of those circles. And that's it. And so for 12 here, very similar. You're going to put down your 1 that they give you and the 5. I need an open on the 1, closed on the 5. Now let's read the sentence here. So it says that x is less than 1. If x is less than 1, those are numbers facing this way, because think about it. Numbers that are less than 1 are like 0 and negative 1. So we're going to have to be shading in the negative direction. So we're heading towards negative infinity then. Whereas the other one says that x is greater than or equal to 5. So that's why I have that closed circle. If it's greater than 5, let's think of numbers like 6, 10, numbers that are bigger than 5. So we're heading in the right direction towards positive infinity. So we actually have 2 shaded regions here. So this here is a interval. It's going from negative infinity to 1, and we need parentheses on both of them. Whereas the other one, we're going from 5 to positive infinity. So bracket on the 5 and parentheses on the infinity. And because we have 2 intervals, we use a U that represents union, and it's helping the 2 intervals joined together so that you know that this is translating the entire inequality, that these intervals are together. And that's it for this video. So in the next video, I'm going to show you guys about linear patterns and slope formula and everything you need to know about writing a linear equation. All right, so make sure to check out that video. Bye, guys.